Welcome to the Encouragement Engineering Podcast. We can help people to combat the negativity that inundates our daily lives with a positive perspective and positive action. Today's guest is Scott Maderer. In 2011, Scott and his wife, Carrie, took Inspired Stewardship on as a business to serve Christian men and couples that are struggling to live out their calling. They work to help align the way you use your time, your talent, your treasures, so that you can identify and live a fully authentic life that allows you to authentically live your calling, serve others, and provide for your family. As certified human behavior consultants and members of the John Maxwell Team, they focus on helping you understand yourself, understand others, and through the understanding, build the kingdom. In 2017, they took the business full-time, offering assistance through one-on-one coaching, speaking, and workshops. So please welcome to the show, Scott Maderer. Scott, thank you for being here today. I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely, Bob. I'm honored to be here and looking forward to having a chat with you and sharing some value for your listeners.
Well, I think it will be great because I think in today's world, you bring a good service. We all need inspiration. We all need that stewardship, which is basically helping one another to help remind people of that's a good thing to do. So appreciate you being able to share that with the audience. But why don't we give them a little bit of a background about you and how you got to where you are?
Sure. So I started actually as a school teacher. So I went to college, Texas A&M University. So Giga Aggies, for anyone who's listening, and I have a degree in biochemistry. I have a second degree in genetics. I actually started down the road of doing medical research, figured out real quick that was not a passion, not something I wanted to do. So I pivoted and became a school teacher. My mom was a teacher, had become a principal, vice principal. My dad actually started as a teacher, but then became a small business owner. So I kind of had that history, that bug. And so I became a school teacher, taught middle school for 11 years, taught high school for 5. I've taught
Bless you. Thank you for your service.
I actually love middle school. I taught 6th graders, I taught 7th graders. I never taught 8th graders. I taught 9th graders, 10th graders, 11th graders, and 12th graders. So 8th is the only thing I didn't do. I was certified to teach all sciences, but I never taught earth science. My joke is I can teach any science, but I don't do rocks. That's that. So I did that for a number of years. I loved it, but burned out on it. It's a tough job. Low pay, long hours, lots of grief, lots of paperwork. So I left that and became I went to join the dark side, according to my students. I went from being a teacher to working for educational testing service, writing tests for a living. So pivoted into the testing industry, did that for 11 years. Worked myself up into senior management, running a team of 100 and something people, reporting to me, flying all over the country, being a road warrior, spent a lot of times and know what a lot of hotels and a lot of airports and a lot of conference rooms look like. Business travel is not nearly as glamorous as people think it is.
No.
So did that for 11 years, got tired of being on the road so much. And so in 2011, actually started the coaching business on the side, doing a lot of coaching calls from hotel rooms and airport lobbies and all sorts of weird places, but made it work and started doing it virtual. And then as it grew, I backed off and kind of stepped back down from a senior position to a less senior position, and then to a part-time position, and then left in 2017 and have been doing the coaching business full-time since then.
Well, and that's, a great reminder to people. One is just don't jump ship if you're not prepared to, but it sounded like you had a passion for this. If you're building it on the side, I mean, there's obviously something that drives you to do it. Like you said, airport lobbies, wherever you can to fit it in there. Was Inspired Stewardship based off of a life lesson you learned, or how did that all come about?
Sure. So when my wife and I first started the coaching business, and even though she doesn't do that much coaching with me anymore, we still coach occasionally together, but she's still a big part of the business. When we first started it, the idea actually came out of doing financial coaching. My wife and I had our own experience of getting out of debt, dealing with a lot of, I was suicidal because of financial stress, almost took my own life a couple of times, didn't obviously, and eventually opened up to my wife, and we kind of worked together and fought our way out of that. And so it started with people just looking at us and going, hey, how did you do that?
Right.
Sharing our testimony, sharing what we did. But real quickly, I figured out that when I was working with people on money, almost inevitably questions came up about time and questions came up about calling.
Right.
They're all kind of tied together. I really wish I could do this, but I'm stuck in this corporate job and it's a great job, but I can't leave it because fill in the blank,
Right.
Or I'm trying to get this off the ground, but I'm struggling around time management, productivity, and knowing what the right things to do. Or, I know I should be doing something, but I'm not sure what it is yet. How do I figure out what my calling is? So all of these areas were kind of all tied together. And so we began to expand from just doing financial coaching to also doing productivity and also leadership and kind of self-development.
Right.
And as we did that, the lens that came clear to me, because when the business started, it wasn't actually called Inspired Stewardship. It's had a couple of different, it's evolved over time.
Right.
It became, what I'm talking about is stewardship. And my joke is people come for coaching on time or on productivity, time management, or on finances, because that's usually what they think the problem is. But the reality is I really only coach on one thing, and that's the talent lane. Because at the end of the day, how we handle our time, how we handle our money is really much more about how we handle ourselves.
Right.
And so that's really where the work is. The trick is, though, that, that's never what you think the work needs to be. You always think it's, give me the app that'll fix it or whatever, but that's not how that works.
That's funny. You kind of redirect them to focus on the big part. What's interesting, I was looking at some of your previous podcasts and so forth, and it was, the Bible shows us examples of stewardship, of tithing, of working, and you tie that into what you do. Do you help remind people of these facts, of these concepts that are already in the Bible? That's a book that's over 2,000 years old.
Sure.
Yeah.
So a little bit, and yes and no is the short answer. So here's part of it. As a coach, my job is not to inflict my values or my viewpoint on the client, but help them identify their values, their viewpoint, and then live authentically into that. That being said, my podcast is faith-based. Mm-hmm. I tell people up front, I look at things through a faith-based lens. I'm going to talk about the Bible. Right. If that bothers you, I'm probably not the right coach for you. If that's fine with you, you don't have to be a believer. It's not, I'm not telling you have to believe this, but that's the lens through which I'm going to present things and frame things and talk about things. And if that isn't authentic to what you need, then we need to find you another coach, because that's just how I'm going to be. I also use a lot of humor. So if you don't like somebody who's going to laugh and crack jokes, then I'm probably not the right coach for you too. So, there's a lot of different reasons why you have to find a coach that's a good fit for your personality, your style, and your approach.
And I find that interesting because to me, it seems like if it was a faith-based scenario, or at least integrated with that, it makes any change that much easier. Change is hard for us. And I think that makes that comfort level. It gives that hope. It gives those stories. It gives that example. And I'm sure you integrate real life scenarios in there that, help people to see the value of taking these steps. I find it interesting too. You're a human behaviorist. I'm sure that you get a lot of different aspects of watching people come in and that change and so forth. Mm-hmm. Do you see people kind of limit their potential when they first come in, or how does that work? Because I would imagine they come in and like you said, they're focused on one thing, but then they turn to another, and it opens up a whole nother realm that they didn't even realize was there.
Almost inevitably. Most of the time, for most of us, we can see the problem that's in front of us in a narrow way. And one reason that coaching can be very effective for people is the coach is not in the emotion of the moment. They're not in the weeds of the moment. It's when the credit card company's calling and yelling, they're not yelling at me, and there's that kind of feeling, if it's a career question, well, at the end of the day, I care as a coach, but I'm also not in the weeds in a way where the emotion interferes with thinking.
Right.
And so often as a coach, it's reflecting back to the client and saying out loud the things that aren't really being said.
Right.
And all of a sudden it's like, oh, my joke is, in a way, sometimes what I'm telling you, it's obvious, but it's not obvious to you at that moment.
Right.
But when you hear it, you're like, well, duh. Okay. I should have thought of that. It's like, well, no, you couldn't have thought of that because you're in the weeds right now. And I'm at the 50,000 foot. And so in doing that, it's about finding those things that are the questions behind the questions, or the reasons behind the reasons. And usually people don't know that's there until they've been working a while. You ask people, what's your why? Why do you want to do this? Whatever this is.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you want to get out of debt? Why do you want to buy a new house? Why do you want to change careers? And the answer most people give initially is a surface level answer. I want to get out of debt because I'm tired of being in debt. Well, yeah, but why? And you got to kind of keep digging and getting to the why behind the why, behind the why, behind the why. And somewhere about 5, 6, 7, 8 levels deep. Yeah. It's like, oh, this is actually my reason. This is my driving force. This is what I'm after. And that's the beauty, because it's not the surface level problem anymore. Now it's really real change.
Well, and that's what's interesting. I've heard that before too. Dean Graziosi mentions that your true why, you've got to go 6 levels deep, minimum 6 to 7 levels before. That's when the emotion and the real tie to it really comes in and really causes that desire, that wanting to change. And you see, like you said, you see that aha moment where all of a sudden they're enlightened and they're going to be taking action that they never thought they could before, because they see it in a different light.
It also opens up sometimes a different decision. And what I mean by that is, so as an example, I had a client couple that their ultimate dream was to travel, but what they had set as a goal was kind of paying off the house, because that was going to free up their ability to travel. But as we began to really dig in and figure out why they wanted to travel and what their goals were and whatever, they ended up actually just selling the house and buying an RV and going and traveling now instead of in 40 years, when they were planning on it. And it was like, and they're like, why didn't we think of this? And it's, well, because you were so tied up with the immediate goal, which was a good goal. And it's a good endpoint. But they lost track of the fact that the ultimate goal down the road was something different. And so it's kind of one of these things of, well, wait, we can actually have this now, It's like, well, yeah, you can, you're set up in a way that you could. And by the way, they eventually came back from traveling and bought a house and settled down, and, but they were able to do and get that part of the dream done. And of course they have other things and more wise and deeper, but that's an example of sometimes you lose sight of the obvious because you haven't really thought through what's the ultimate goal, what's the real deep reason why I want to do this, and what's the deep thing that I really want to be able to do.
And thank you for that reminder, because so many times we do put things off in life because, oh, we need to save up for it. Oh, we need to, but we need to also live, because nobody's guaranteed tomorrow. And, as pessimistic as that sounds, I've seen it where, boom, somebody's gone the next day. They didn't wake up. And that does happen. That's a reality of life. Death, taxes, and change are all realities in life. But, it's an idea that you gave right there is, look at how you might be able to do this now. You offer hope to people. That's a great thing to be able to do. So
I would phrase it slightly different. I think what I do is help people discover hope. So, and there's a difference, because I, as a coach, I'm a guide. I don't, you got to do the work, you've got to make the change. You've got to do the hard part. You're, the client is the hero in the journey. I'm the guide. I'm Yoda, not Luke Skywalker,
darn it.
I'm a little green guy with big ears, but you get to be that. And that's not, no, I'm not taking anything away from myself or saying that's not a valuable job or not a valuable task, but I have to keep that focus, because otherwise, if I'm injecting hope, I'm in a way imparting my belief and my value and my priority on the client when they really have to discover that themselves. That's the beauty of coaching and the art of coaching, and quite frankly, it's the really hard part of coaching too.
Yeah. Bite your tongue,
Yeah.
Now, I know as a coach, it's one thing you ask a lot of questions to guide them, but you don't want to give an answer because, like you said, they need to do the work. They need to grab that rope, climb that mountain, and no matter what decision it is. So did you go to, you got the human behaviorist certifications. Did you go to other certifications for your coaching business or what?
I've done a lot of different trainings over the years. So, again, John Maxwell Team has training in coaching. I've gone through, some work with Dave Ramsey's organization. I've gone through work with the Personality Insights, which is the human behavior studies. So I've done a lot. And then, of course, I've done a lot of self-training. And, I've spent, thousands of hours and thousands of dollars on various trainings. So I'm not certified in terms of there's a specific certification that says this is the coaching certificate. But what I do have is training and experience. And on coaching, there is a pure coaching situation, which is the asking questions. There's also, if you think about it, in some ways, coaching can be considered a continuum where all the other way at the other end is kind of consulting models, which is you have a problem, I have a solution, you ask me to come in and implement my solution to your problem.
Right.
And with then there's education, then there's mentorship, then there's different modalities that you can adopt.
Right.
And I've tried to train myself in all of those modalities so that I can use the appropriate one at the appropriate place for the client.
Right.
If somebody's struggling with a very practical, like, how do I actually do a budget? Very practical, mom and pop, sit down and put numbers. It would be if I adopt a pure coaching mode at that point and go, well, how do you think you should budget? They're going to get frustrated.
Right.
So at that point, I have to kind of get out of coaching and say, okay, I'm not going to coach you. I'm now going to help you with some tools and some tips and some techniques. So I'm going to put on a teaching hat, or I'm going to put on a consulting hat for a little while. And I try to tell the client if I'm changing hats, and now we're going to do that.
Yeah.
And then now, once we've got numbers on the piece of paper and you've kind of got the practical tips down and the practical tools down, now we get back into pure coaching mode, because now it's about, well, should I cut cable? Well, why do you think you should cut cable?
Right,
because I don't care if you cut cable or not. The numbers are the numbers. You got to figure something out. Where are you going to give? What's important to you? What are the values? What's going to happen if you do this instead of that? Let's talk about scenarios. That's all now back into pure coaching mode and just asking questions. So there is kind of especially with the financial side and the time side, both, there are points where I have to inject tools.
Right.
But I have to ask questions before I know what tools to inject.
Yeah.
And then I have to go back to question mode to help them actually put the tools into action and help them stick. So it's a dance sometimes that you're doing with the client.
It's interesting as you were talking about that, and I'm thinking, okay, background in teaching, great. You have that ability to do that, but your logo behind you, the mountains and all the facets, if you will, of that is just that. There's so many facets that you need to be able to come about and do, like you said, teaching mode, sharing mode, coaching mode. And, every client is different. And so you offer tremendous amount of a plethora of skills for those people to grow on. Great job. Interesting. It's interesting too, that if you will, that formula, that spiritual foundation, focus, time, talent, treasures. Tell us about that. Is that learned, or how did all that come about into your process? Because it's, it's very vital, I think, in that foundation that you're talking about.
So the tagline that I live by, or the coaching tagline is, I help Christians master their time, their talent, and their treasures so that they can live out their calling. Then if somebody says, great, how do you do that? Okay, well, at the end of the day, my framework, and this also shows up, is you first have to invest in yourself. Then you have to invest in others. Then you have to develop your influence. And through that, you can impact the world. Okay. And by the way, the world there could be one person, could be 1,000 people, could be the whole world. I don't care. That's your dream. We have to figure that out. But it's about this idea of, first, if you want to master your time, master your talent, master your treasures, you got to master yourself. That's the invest in yourself point. Again, most of the time, I'll use time as an example. People will say, I don't have enough time. How many times have you, I don't have enough time to do that. Right. That's a lie. It is an utter and complete and total fabrication. Yeah. Okay. You have the exact same amount of time as everyone else on the planet. Yep. What you really should say is, that's not a priority for me, or I'm choosing not to do that. Those are both true statements. And by the way, if it's not a priority to you and you're choosing not to do it, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. No, it's your choice.
The problem is that by losing track of that and saying, I don't have enough time, you start to feel frustrated because you end up saying yes to stuff that's not a priority and no to stuff that is. And then you're mad at yourself. And guess what? You should be. Okay. Because that's the wrong choice, but we lose sight of it sometimes even through our lens or our language. And so that's that invest in yourself point. You've got to recalibrate and reprogram your mind to really look at these things in a realistic way and apply the tools to begin to move forward. The invest in others is, at the end of the day, whether it's you want to build a business, whether it's you want to look at changing, your family dynamic, whether it's you want to, grow and get promoted in your day job, whatever your goals are, whatever you want to travel, like the example I used earlier, you still got to figure out ways to invest and build relationships with others. Right. There's always an other focused piece. And a lot of times we lose track of that because we get so focused on our own goals, we forget about building relationships, building networks, connecting to others. And then of course, the develop your influence is, how do you, through those relationships, build the networks of people that can help you move from success to significance. Right. You can be successful all by yourself. Yeah. It's hard to achieve significance all by yourself, if not impossible. So that's how do you begin to leverage that and connect with others in a way that lets you build influence. And then through that is how we impact the world. And again, that can take a lot of different flavors and a lot of different forms. This is not if you're not building a $60 million business, then, your dream is not, that's not the point. Your dream may just be to actually retire and be able to travel. Your dream may be to be able to go to your daughter's dance recitals and not, have to work. Whatever it is, there's a way you can achieve it, but you kind of have to go through those 4 steps. How it evolved? By mistake, in terms of, I figured this stuff out, over the last 35, 40 years. I've been working on it for myself and for my family, and then begin working on it with other people. I went through that same 4 stages. First I was investing in myself. As I learned things, I began to invest in others and teach others and help them develop. And then through that, I began to get some influence and began to make an impact. And so it's like, oh, well, I can kind of use that framework to explain it to other people. And so that's really where it came from.
That's great. No, it's great. It's the one thing you mentioned in a couple of your podcasts is this is not a, if you will, get rich quick scenario. As you mentioned, this is over 30, 40 years of your life that you've experienced this. And we've got to remind people, I think, this is not something that's going to happen overnight. It's hard to, turn our ship around. You can always change direction, but you've got to make that effort, and that effort will take time. So interesting, Absolutely. Scenario with that, because reminding people that it does take time is a big piece of that. Do you find that when people start this, do they, like you said, they could be mad because of their situation now, because of the choices they've made? How does their attitude evolve as they grow through this?
So there's a couple of different phrases that I use a lot, and you'll hear it, whether it's listening to the podcast or whether you're one of my clients or whether you're another coach I'm working with in coaching. One is, it's progress, not perfect. And the idea is, it's more important that you're moving forward than that you're trying to get everything right. The other half of that is this idea of, it's more consistency over time is more important than the big change.
Right.
Most people don't have an overnight success. Most people don't have they suddenly win the lottery. These kind of life-changing moments. And honestly, even a lot of times when they do those, they don't stick.
Yeah.
Because they haven't really built
that foundation.
They haven't built the foundation of the habits. And so we really just focus on small incremental change done consistently over a long period of time makes a big difference. And how people's attitudes are, most people come in and feel, a lot of it, most of us spend a lot of time looking at yesterday and then beating ourselves up about it. And so what I try to turn people towards is, it's just like a windshield and a rearview mirror.
Amen,
you
brother.
have both in your car, but the rear view mirror is tiny and the windshield's big, right? So let's spend more of our time looking forward and less of our time looking back. We only look back to learn from it and to see what happened. We don't look back to beat ourselves up, because here's the truth. Most of us make the best decision we thought we could make at the time we made it with the information we had. The truth is, usually when you're beating yourself up, it's because you now have new information, and you're somehow putting on your past self the idea that they should have known, that past person should have known what the future self knows. And it's like, guess what? You didn't know it. If you would have known it, you would have made a different decision. So that's the lens through which we look at things. And then we're like, we're frustrated, we're tired, we're emotional. And when you can kind of break that cycle, all of a sudden you can start making different decisions.
Great reminder of that, because I use that a lot. And like, Jim Rohn used to say, whatever's easy to do is easy not to do. It's eat an apple a day. How many people do it? Eat a chocolate bar every day.
Well, that's a lot easier. It's the easy thing today often leads to a hard thing down the road, where the hard thing today often leads to easy things down the road too. Which is hard to remember. That's the whole idea of delayed gratification. That's the whole idea of, being able to say no to something today to get a bigger yes in the future. We're back to, why do you have to have a big enough why? Because that's the only thing that lets you say no today. It's got to be a big enough future state that you're like, no, I'm saying no today because I want that tomorrow. And you're able to look into that future state and feel the emotion of it and feel the weight of it. Then maybe you can say no to the chocolate bar and yes to the apple.
Right. Thank you for that analogy. Reminds you, working out, that's what that is. That, every day, small, consistent things every day. And when you're, older and you're still able to move and move around well, I think part of this pandemic has shown us the value of health. And it's such a great thing to be able to take those small steps every day, walking, get your mind right, focus on positive things, build your body strength so you can fight off certain things. Great concepts. So thank you for that. Well, Scott, where can people find out more about you and your podcast and what else you're doing?
Sure. So the podcast is called Inspired Stewardship. It should be pretty much anywhere that you subscribe to a podcast. You can search for Inspired Stewardship. You can always find me over at my website, inspiredstewardship.com. So again, easy to remember. That has links to social media, that has links to the podcast episodes, that has links to some freebies that are on there. I will have a page for your listeners over at inspiredstewardship.com in encouragement. Inspiredstewardship.com encouragement, and put a few free resources up there that they can use.
Well, thank you.
As well. So anything, there'll also be a link there if they want to have a quick chat with me. Free. I don't do a hard sale. I'm not going to try to sell you anything or anything like that. It's just, if there's something that I can help kind of in 30 minutes break you free from something, I'd love to have a chat. So we can do that as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the inspiration and thank you for that offer. I really appreciate that, because I know the listeners will definitely like that. I think helping people to realize the benefits they have, not only within them, the greatness they have within them. You're doing it. It sounds like you're doing it such a great job with people. So thank you for doing what you're doing. Thank you for sharing with us today about what you do. I really appreciate you being a guest on the Encouragement Engineering podcast. So Scott, thanks again for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I was honored to be here. And again, check it out over inspiredstewardship.com encouragement. And if there's anything I can ever do to help you or your listeners, I'd be happy to do it.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. You have a great day then.
You too.